Monica, for being here with us today. We are so excited to be speaking with you and learning more about the work that you're doing at Kraft Heinz. We'd love to first take it off to you and have you share a little bit more about yourself and your impact as an HR leader across D&I around many different organizations you've worked at.
Thank you first for having me. Very excited to be here. My name is Monica Novomisle. I'm the Chief People Officer for North America at Kraft Heinz. I actually am a recovering lawyer, so I spent my first 10 years of my career practicing in employment and labor law, mostly on the management side, and it gave me a great way to start my career because I had to learn business acumen through people, how to read a P&L and see how you pull the people levers in order to generate performance drivers. And I think that that's probably one of the places that I have learned my largest impact was taking that experience and bringing it into my HR career. So I moved into HR about 10 roles ago. Usually I'm the head of a market or in a strategy role around organizational effectiveness. And one of the things that I've learned about DE&I is that it is actually has a lot of impact on the business drivers. So as an example, research shows that if you have a very diverse and inclusive environment, your innovation and your R&D space actually will exceed expectations or deliver double what was expected. And so I think that one place that I've oftentimes had an impact is being able for people who don't have our expertise necessarily in HR, make the connection between their P&L and the necessity for DE&I.
Thank you for sharing, Monica. That is so needed, and I think now more than ever. And so I appreciate your leadership and using data to tell that narrative. I know, speaking of innovation, you've talked about how you designed your early careers practice to be a little different so that you can have more diversity. Would love to hear more about that.
So a few things. One of the reasons that I joined Kraft Heinz is because Miguel Patricio, who's our global CEO, and Carlos Abrams Rivera, our North America CEO, they redesigned our values about 2 years ago. And when they did, they wrote, "We demand diversity." And one of the things that I thought was very unique is you oftentimes see a value about diversity for corporations, but nobody chooses the verb demand. And to me, when I talked to them, I realized that they understood the necessity of diversity, inclusion, and belonging in order to meet the business needs and the culture that we want to have at Kraft Heinz. So as a result, we have been really working on our early career program and innovating a lot in that space to make sure that we have a very different experience for our early career. Now, at Kraft Heinz, one of our biggest values is meritocracy, and meritocracy is a beautiful ideal. That means that we believe that as you perform, we reward you through growth, promotions, and pay. Now, the downside for meritocracy is that the ideal assumes that all of us have the same starting line, but we know in reality that doesn't exist. So when you as a value are living out meritocracy, which we do here, you also have to look at how you are balancing that through equity. So with our early career program, we have refreshed it so that as we bring in a new class of women and people of color and people of all different types of backgrounds, we are giving them an experience that is very different than I think is at most companies. As an example, our interns, trainees, MBAs meet with the board and have breakfast with them during board meetings. In fact, it's board meetings right now, and they're having lunch with them. We have them oftentimes work on our Global Leadership Council, so they learn the business in a very different way. And at the same time, they are interacting with our top 120 leaders across the global business. We have them sit, so as an example, in HR right now, we are working on revolutionizing our employee experience to become much more digitized and much more appealable to digitally native people Gen Z, and Gen A. Our steerco is not the 5 CPOs. It's our trainees, because they're the generation who can tell us where things are going to go. And so we really see our trainees as coaches, mentors, and we give them different levels of exposure and extremely high input into the future of the company. And I believe deeply that that sets our succession plans up to look very differently in the future and at most companies.
That's incredibly powerful, Monica, for so many reasons. I love you speaking about we demand diversity and the strategies that your team is actually doing to put action behind these types of initiatives. And I noticed on your website that you have a bold vision of making a goal by 2025 that 30% of your salaried employees will be people of color. That's exciting, and 2025 is not that far off. What are the other strategies that you're implementing to make that happen?
So I think one of the things that we have been doing, as you said, we have 2 aspirations in the United States. One is that we have committed that by 2025, 50% of all of our levels of management will have female representation. And then we will also have demographic parity within people of color, 30% in the United States. There are also aspirations for Brazil and a few other countries, but that's what I'm focused on in North America with the leadership team. And I am proud to tell you that we are beating those aspiration plans right now, which makes me wildly pleased. I think what we have realized, and it's a journey for everyone, right? Diversity, inclusion, and belonging is not easy for anyone. If there was somebody who had figured it out, they would be a multi-million-dollar consultant right now, right? And I think it's difficult because diversity may be the aspiration of having different people at the table, but inclusion and belonging is where each and every person is actually adding to the meal, right? And we know that that's not always human nature. And it requires a lot of uncomfortable behavior to do that. So what I've really found as we've done this aspiration is that meeting the aspiration by number is way easier than assuming the inclusion, belonging, and equity part. And we have really started to change the way that we behave and the way that we approach even decision making at Kraft Heinz, to make sure that we are thinking of ourselves as a community. We constantly work at being a big company that's a small community and making sure that we invite every voice. So let me give you some examples to make that more real. Friday, unfortunately, we experienced another incident of violence against Asians. And of course, immediately we started to work on a letter from the leadership team to the company. But we didn't write that letter by ourselves. We paused and we immediately went to our business resource group, our Asian business resource group, and we asked, what's the appropriate response? Well, what support would you like to feel? How do you want to be involved? What's the moment to do this during the Lunar New Year? And we changed our approach based on the feedback that we heard. Our leadership team right now is calling every member that has identified as Southeast Asian to check in and make sure they're feeling safe and we can't support them. We did send a letter, of course. We also pulled the BRG together to let them talk about how we can show support and how we can really embrace the community at this moment. And so I think it's moments like that where people would say, well, yes, that's treating people like humans. But it's really making sure you do that each and every time. Another moment for me where it was very different was when the Dobbs decision came down. We invited each BRG into the room on that Friday, and we talked to them about all the decisions we had to make. And what was beautiful to me is while they shared their emotions, they also gave us feedback on what they expected from us based on what they know of our business and our customer. And they gave us sort of a roadmap of how they believed our culture would embrace this and what we would do as a company. And they asked every question to make us prepared. And as a result, we really leaned into our culture and made good decisions because we had so many people with different perspectives at the table that day.
These are powerful examples, Monica, and I really love to double down on the business resource groups, because not only are you taking the actions, you're making sure that the right voice and the people are in the room during those conversations, which I think more leaders need to do. So would love to hear, how have you designed your business resource groups to feel empowered, to come forward with a roadmap, to have that voice with you, and maybe what can others do to implement something like this in their company?
Again, one of the things that I espoused at the very beginning is that I think what's most powerful is when you are absolutely sure that you understand how to connect your D-I-B agenda to the business's agenda. Because if both grow at the same time, it is a magical, unstoppable thing. And so I think one of the things that we've really done well with our BRGs is that each BRG is run by a business leader, by a community of business leaders. They are invited to give deep feedback on our business, and that has happened multiple times. Our BRG has oftentimes guided some feedback on the de-averaging of the consumer in our Oscar Mayer space. The LGBTQ community came to us with some ideas and some very hard feedback for us around some other campaigns that we were doing. And so oftentimes they are actually giving a lot of feedback about our customer and our consumer, not just about us as an employer. Now, we also have engaged them very tightly in hiring and recruiting and our early career program. Also, the Women's BRG and the Black BRG have helped us create very tailored or curated menus and training programs for high potential women and people of color in order to assure that our succession plans are truly diverse. And we've won a number of awards for those, but it wasn't built necessarily. I mean, HR helped, but the BRGs really gave us a much better sense of how to help women, as an example, through We Network, learn, and what it was they had to do to just get to that next level that might be the blockade. So again, it's a little bit like French food. What I'm saying is pretty simple, but to execute it in a company that is 18,000 big in North America and 30,000 big around the world is actually quite difficult to do brilliantly with that many people. But we've done it.
I would agree. And I would also agree French food is not easy. I know it requires a lot of butter and it's very delicious, but it does take a lot of time and effort. And I do think it's really fascinating and exciting to see the power that all of these business leaders are so deeply involved in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, because that's what we need in order to make that successful. It has to be woven in to every aspect of a business, not just siloed within one HR practice. It is the culture and everything. I'd love to double down a little bit more on the topic of inclusion and belonging, because this is something that I think is a little bit hidden, right? You can't see it visually in the numbers. You can't see it externally on a website, but it's important to know, do people feel like they belong? Do they feel like they can speak up? You talked about doing some great innovations and rethinking your employee experience strategy. Do the two have anything to do with each other? We'd love to know more.
So I think that from the inclusion perspective, I have to pause and again give a real shout out to our two CEOs, Miguel and Carlos. If you look at the time that they have been with Kraft Heinz and you look at the makeup of our leadership teams and even the makeup of our board, you will see that it has remarkably diversified. And the North American leadership team, which I'm part of, is the most diverse group I have ever worked with, both in the stereotypical term of that and also from a much broader concept of that. I mention that because I think inclusion starts with looking up and making sure that you see yourself everywhere, right? And I think that work that we have done to onboard such diverse leaders at every dynamic of the word diversity has really helped us have an empathetic leadership group that understands being an outsider at one point or another in their career, and as a result is just much more sensitive to being inclusive, to assuring that people are coming along, and at least to making sure that all voices are represented and being heard. So is the employee experience part of that? Absolutely. And I can give lots of little examples to that. So I think a lot of companies use their engagement survey as a way in which to get feedback. And listen, we do as well. And I'm particularly proud because we have a 91% participation rate, which is unheard of, right? But we also have done a lot of work in the last 2 years to open up many more channels to hear our employees so that they feel like there is accessibility, that there is transparency, and that we are taking their feedback seriously. So, I mean, we have used the BRGs to give us feedback at many different moments in time. We have opened up a number of different channels. As an example, in every function, we have an engagement council made up of different swaths of levels and also groups who give us feedback. We even have that in each one of our plants for our hourly populations. And we bring all that information up, so we're not just receiving it in the engagement survey. And what makes me proud of that is through all that work, the participation rate has raised to a place where I think I can confidently say on behalf of the company, you don't get 91% participation unless they believe you're going to take action. Everyone, not just a certain swath of that. So I really deeply believe that starts with leadership role modeling, and they've done that through all of the different channels that they've set up, and then the actions we take as a result.
Absolutely. I think that 91%, I was going to follow up. How did you do that? And it's really exciting. I mean, I think I'd love to just understand, how do you, when you get all this feedback, because it's one thing to collect feedback and then to act on it, right? Especially if you're getting a lot of feedback and constantly collecting this, how do you kind of deliver and show the strides that you're making?
So we have been extremely surgical this year in assuring that a few things have happened. One is that we have made sure, as I mentioned, that every single group has an engagement council, and that engagement council is diverse in every way that you can think of. Junior employees, senior employees, people from different walks of life, different socioeconomic education. And when we do that, we get their feedback on what has to happen at an overall top level if you were a top down. But then we also say, okay, you guys helped us realize that this year we're going to focus on collaboration, community, and connection. So now I hand that back to you to develop the plan for your area and your specifics on how you'll lean into these 3 pillars. We'll take the overall zone, and you take care of your house or your community. And I think by doing that, we've managed to make sure that different populations, no matter how small or big, are being heard and receiving attention.
That's very helpful to understand, and would love to take another zoom out and just understand what do you think is on the horizon for the next year for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? Anything that you're looking forward to? Anything you think leaders should have top of mind?
I thought about this question a lot because you let me know that you were going to ask me, right? And I really have been thinking a lot about that. I think there's a lot of things coming right now. I think that I think that we are going to see a very different approach to DIMB in the future, because look, the labor shortage has really driven accountability for employers. You can't just talk the talk anymore. You have to walk the talk as well. And employees now have many more opportunities and many more avenues. And so I think that's bringing real accountability, not just to the D, but also to the I and the B. And so I'm super excited to see what happens in the space because I think the pressure is there. I also think that the pandemic brought a hyperbolic focus on mental health. And I think that that will finally bring us to conversations that are long overdue about disabilities and neurodiversity, and really starting to not have that be an invisible minority. So as an example, I have ADHD. I didn't used to talk about that publicly, right? But I think that now I've realized that one, everyone is struggling after the pandemic with mental health, and we need to start bringing those conversations into a public forum so that we can help each other as a community, give each other support, give it exposure, give it allyship, and make sure that it's taken care of. And so I really think that invisible disabilities, as well as the disabilities overall, will start to really finally get the focus that that community really deserves. And then I think last but not least, I think allyship is going to be a much bigger influencer. At Kraft Heinz, our head of sales name is Corey O'Neill, and I have never met someone more passionate about women's inclusion, women's representation, and women feeling like they belong. And that is at every level. He makes sure he goes to conferences. He makes sure that he walks the talk. He makes sure that his leadership team is not only represented, but is belonging. And he has pushed this organization on how we react to things and how we take things seriously. And I think that sometimes a powerful ally can say things that maybe entire groups even forget they need to voice. And so I really think that we're going to see some really powerful influencing through allyship.
Thank you, Monica. This makes me really excited for what's ahead. And as someone who's a big proponent of social impact and advocacy, I think allyship is so important, because sometimes you don't feel like you have a voice, but if there is an ally there to support you, you can feel like you can be a part of the conversation and you can really be active. So I think this is so powerful. I would double down and agree on all those trends that you suggested. And I want to share, our last question. And really, this is something that we believe in so dearly at Symba as a woman-founded company and a social impact project with late Congressman John Lewis, is our mission to #open up the workforce. And what that means to us is creating equitable access to jobs and wealth creation. So I'd love to get your take, Monica. What do you believe are the next steps for talent leaders in order to open up the workforce today?
That is such a good question. I think that there are really three things that we have to do in order to assure that we have a much different workforce. One, I think, as we've been speaking about through this entire thing, I don't think it can be a people want. I think it has to be a business imperative, which is why I am so proud to work at a place that says we demand diversity. They understand that having different people in the room gets the business further, and that without that difference, you won't get the business to where you want it to go to choose greatness. So for me, that is the number one secret sauce to getting a good start on where we're going. I think the second, and I think the pandemic taught us this, not only through many stories of example, but also through the feelings that each and every one of us had. I think leadership in the past may have been considered as I tell you or I teach you. And I think we're going to a much more humble place of leadership where it is I listen, I coach, and I bring all the high performing talent together to discuss how we get there. I am a leader. I am a team leader, right? I am a coach of leaders. I am not the leader. And I think that new focus that the pandemic has brought on humility for leadership, I think will allow a much more inclusive community and workforce. And last but not least, I definitely think that our early career programs at every single corporation, if focused correctly and seen as the next generation of leaders, not just seen, Ava, but also committed to, giving them every opportunity to see how they raise up, to see how they step up, to see what the company could be in 15 years and have them help develop its future. That is the type of corporation I think that will really win at inclusivity.
Incredible, Monica. That is exactly, when you speak about this, what we mean by leaders who embrace #open up the workforce. I appreciate you for your leadership and everything that you're doing in this space. And I'm grateful for all the stories and examples that I'm excited to share with others so they can learn and do the great work that you're doing. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up today?
No, I just want to say thank you so much for giving me the platform with which to speak about not only my own passion, but my company's passion around demanding diversity and really being passionate about inclusion. Not everyone asks. So a huge thank you to you and your organization for giving the platform for these conversations.
Absolutely. It's what we believe in, and we're honored and humbled to have you on with us. Thank you so much, Monica.
Thank you.